Philipp, last race yesterday, Berlin half. How did it go? You ran with me and Alish for a little while.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about how the last experience of racing on the roads was for you yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, Berlin is always very special because I have a long history of coming to Berlin for various races from 10K to marathon. So you can imagine if you get out of the bus, like the lead bus at the start line, and you look down to Brandenburg Gate, it's already like I was already like a little bit emotional just before the start. But the race for me was a little bit unexpected because Mark Milde, the race director, he just approached me also just before my warm-up. I can join you as well, as we were talking at a technical meeting, to support Eilish a little bit on her quest for the national record. And that's how we started the race together. And I'm pretty sure there are a lot of guys here who ran yesterday. It was not the easiest, one of the easiest weather conditions out there, especially in the second half. So I was accompanying Eilish until about 14-15K at 65 something half marathon pace. But I also told Mark Milde before that I want to have like the last 5 to 6K to use it a little bit different than normally. Because if you're a serious like professional athlete, usually you're like really grinding it out until the finish line. But the last 5 to 6K I took it like a longer like finishing lap, victory lap, you know, like to have some fun with the running crew, with Adidas runners, and to enjoy those last kilometers to make some memories. And crossing the finish line with so many familiar faces, with my family, with my wife, my daughter, and maybe there was one tear or two.
Yeah, of course. I was surprised in the start area. All the photographers were there, and they were all taking photos of Philipp. And obviously, you know, you weren't here to run a personal best. You were here to run your last race. So it just goes to show how much of a sort of local legend in Strava's terms Philipp is. But you've run quite a lot of events in Berlin over the last decade in terms of the marathon and half marathon. You must have seen a pretty nice progression in the SEC's events. Since when was the very first time you raced in Berlin over the marathon, 10K or half? It must stem over quite a few years.
Yeah, I think it was in 2015 actually. Right. It was the Adidas Runner City Night, which is typically at the last weekend of July. Yeah. It's a 10K road race. That was my first experience running in Berlin. I was lucky enough to win the race, so I had already like really good memories because there's a lot of support on the road, and it was after the race that I decided to run the Berlin Marathon. I tried to run my first marathon the year before Frankfurt, which was not so successful. I was a little bit maybe not serious enough about marathon running, because you know, if you come from track and you're used for 5K to run about 240 pace, you think, how difficult can it be to run a marathon? I mean, it's 3:10, 3:08 pace. That's nothing compared to what you're used to run. But I was not focusing on like how much you should drink and like how much carbs you can take in per hour. So I was not able to finish my first marathon. So Berlin in 2015 was my second attempt to run a marathon, and my first marathon which I could finish, and it was also the time which qualified me for the Olympic Games. So in Rio. So typically, if journalists ask about the most important race in your career, they expect me to tell it's Olympic Games because it's the big dream I had since I was a little child. But for me, the most memorable, most important race is actually my first marathon in Berlin in 2015.
2015. Yeah. And so when you said you came from the 5K, obviously 240, you were 13:31?
13:31, so not 242.
Well, very close, yeah. You ran that first couple of marathons where you realised, I thought this was going to be easy.
Oh yeah.
Clearly I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
What did you do to sort that out and to ultimately qualify for Olympics? There was obviously this realisation of nutrition plays a big role in this. Absolutely. A lot of running at that LT sort of marathon pace effort. It sounds like that was the switch for you, and I'm curious to know if you remember after that first couple where you were like, oh, this is totally different. Did you think, I want to stick to the 5 and forget that? That seems too hard. You obviously didn't do that. You went, no, I want to try and tackle this. But what did you learn in those next couple of months and next couple of years?
In fact, it was, I think I became a professional runner because I did a lot of running besides going to college. So I went as a professional runner like in 2013 when I signed with Adidas. And the original plan for me actually was to qualify for the Olympics on track.
Yes.
On halfway to Rio, I realized I might not be talented enough to run 27:30 or 13:15. So that was when I thought, okay, I have to quit or I have to completely change. So that's when I decided to give road running a shot. But after the bad experience I had in my first marathon in Frankfurt, I was like, okay, maybe I'm not made to run a marathon, because there are a lot of like famous examples of really, really great track runners who never made it on the marathon. So I was like, okay, maybe my body is not made for marathons. And actually my best friend convinced me to give it a second shot, because in 2014 I was already like 3 months not running anymore. I thought, okay, that's it, I'm not able to run 2:12 or faster. So the major, I think, changes and experience I collected from Frankfurt was to have really detailed nutrition plan. We learned about, with some experts, sweat rate, because it's very different. You cannot like compare from one individual to another. I'm a fairly tall runner, so especially if it's warm, I mean, if you have more like, what is it? More skin which can heat up actually.
Yes, right.
So I sweat a lot. So we learned I had to drink 200 to 250 milliliters every 5k of fluid, also with a specific amount of salt. It was also the pre-Morton era, so I had some experts who actually made my own race fuel back then, like some kind of powder which was designed for my sweat rate and blood levels. And we executed this very serious in training, so to learn how much to train your stomach as well, because in the beginning, if you run, let's say, around 19 kilometers per hour, it's not so easy to like drink 800 milliliters of fluid like for 1 hour and not throw up actually. So that was for me, I think, the biggest game changer. And yeah, I mean, the race in Berlin was also, for me, it was very helpful that at that point of time there was a lot, I mean, it was the pre-Olympic year, so a lot of guys from other European countries, like the Belgian, Dutch runners I knew, were there, so we had a big group, and actually with 2 of them I ran into the finish line, so it was not very lonesome on the last 10K.
That's very helpful as well, having people to run with. Yeah. Speaking of memorable times, obviously that race was huge for you in qualifying. What are some other big memories that stand out? Put yourself 20 years into the future and you're talking to your grandkids and maybe 30 years, sorry. What are some of the most memorable things to you in your career as running? Soon we'll speak about the unfortunate situations that you had in not running faster, but what are some other races that you look back at and think that's probably one of the best memories of mine from your running career?
I mean, okay, Berlin Marathon 2015, also Olympic Games. I have to mention Olympic Games, very special. I mean, also running with Eliud Kipchoge and a lot of other like goats. It was really like the realization when I stood there on the start line with like 150, 155 of the best marathon runners of the world. So I am doing here right now. So that was also very special, also because of the conditions. For me, it was the first race not in the spring or fall. I mean, it was winter in Rio, but still for us it was some kind of tough. It was very humid, I think 90 to 95% humidity, because it rained just before the race. 25 degrees was also like not like normal experience. So I was starting very conservative, and I think 110th place, like really the last group basically for halfway, and still I slowed on the second half for 2 or 3 minutes, but we picked up like 60 guys because everyone was really hurting. And other than that, for me, one of my favorite races to ever run was actually the Adidas Runner City Night 10Ks in summer. It was so much fun. I was fortunate enough to win it 3 times, and it's It's a very fast course. You have to be a little bit lucky because in summer it can be really hot. But I think I also ran my second fastest 10K road time there in 2021. So if you guys haven't run the Adidas Run City Night, you should sign up for this July. Maybe you're in July, maybe from St. Moritz. It's not that tricky to come to Berlin.
Yeah. No, I've heard good things about the event for sure. Well, thanks for sharing some memories. I will never forget that time in Valencia though, when I was sure you were going to run 209 or 210, and I had the tracking app ready for you and everything, and then I'll let you share the story about what happened.
Yeah, it was I have to tell maybe that in 2019 I was not, I had to make some changes for various reasons, but I was training with my coach for 13 years with the training group, and I had the feeling maybe if I want to try to become better, I have to change something. So I went to Kenya, actually without a coach, in January of 2020. I met Sondre Moen there, a friend of mine for quite a while, and he introduced me to Renato Canova, who was kind enough to take me under his wings and change a lot in my training and also in the mental game actually, because I learned what I was doing before in training was not nearly as crazy as I thought what is possible. So we did very intense training actually in 2020 between January and December, and there was not much opportunities to race in the first year of COVID, so it was just like focused training for a long time. And I realized based on the training I did, I mean I was doing workouts I was never able to do before. I was able to do 40k tempo runs with like speed variations in like 312. So it was like
212. Yeah.
312 average.
312 average pace.
Average pace. Right. So I sensed, okay, maybe I should be faster than 212 probably, and I had the opportunity actually to go to Valencia, which was just an elite race back at this point of time. And Renato also told me you can be confident, you can, at least in his opinion, if there's a good race day, you can at least run 210, start with like 105 flat, there should be a group. And yeah, on Tuesday I had to do the COVID test to actually leave Germany, and
this was at the end of 2020 when to go even between countries in Europe you had to get the negative test.
So I was basically isolating myself 3 weeks before this race, also my wife, so we didn't met any persons, and then the COVID test turned out positive, and I was like, no way, I mean how? It's impossible basically. So I went to another station, I did a second test, it was negative, but in Germany they were very strict at that point of time, so if the authorities, if you're like positive, the authorities, no chance to like leave the country. So between Tuesday and I think Friday, I wasn't sleeping very much. When I was going like from one place of authority to another, I did in total I think I did 4 tests. All other tests were negative. But also the organizers didn't want me to come anymore because they said you put our event at risk. If there's something we cannot run at all. And it took me until Friday night until they agreed that I can come. No flights anymore, so it was a little bit tricky to fly across Europe to arrive there at I think Saturday afternoon. No technical meeting, the number was missing, no food. Actually I had my dinner after several calls, because we were not allowed to leave the hotel as well, because they were isolating us until 10 at night. And we had to get up at 4:30 in the morning, so it was a not very ideal race preparation. I still tried to run, and I ran a small personal best, it was 2:12:15, but I mean I was not very happy with the
you were stressed the whole week. I remember sending you a message.
And I still went all in. I mean,
I think we started 2 days before, you weren't even sure if you were going to run it.
No. I think I started 1:04:45 or something with a big group around Thais, Nais and the others, which was awesome, but yeah, I mean I didn't have the energy levels after the stressful week before to run a really good marathon on the last 10k.
And I think that wasn't the only time you had a bit of an unfortunate scenario to not run fast, because one of your races was cancelled at the start of COVID. Is that right?
Actually, you're right. I mean, the original idea was when I started to work with Renato in January. He was he was sending me to Barcelona half. We just worked for 4 weeks. I ran a slight PB, but I was confident to give a spring marathon a shot, because back in February, March, we thought the Olympic Games are still a thing in 2020. So we said we're going to run Hamburg. And so I went a second time to Kenya, because after Barcelona I went another, I think 3 or 4 weeks. Did a lot of training with Sondre and Eric, Kitone, just had Boyd. And like 2 days before I left, Frank Thaler, the race director of Hamburg, called me and he told me, bad news, you trained 2 months in Kenya now, but the race is not going to happen. And then 1 day after, basically all races got cancelled. So.
Yeah. Lots of bad luck in that year. Sorry to re-bring these up. After that I was just very sure your best time was never fully achieved, but 2:12 pre-super shoes is obviously just phenomenal. One thing I've really respected about you is your desire to produce content through your podcast and your YouTube channel, and it's something that not that many athletes actually do unless they're helped out with it, but you've really taken the initiative to do these yourself, and you've gotten a small team around you to help do that. And we've spoken many times about how you're always going to have a little bit of criticism come from people when you put that stuff out there, but you seem to have ignored that more or less, just plowed through, and you've become a bit of a hero in that space. And now I'm seeing more and more athletes doing that, like Stephen Squillian, he's producing videos and
really
podcasts, and I think this is just super important for the sport. And so many athletes that come up through high school are persuaded by this type of content. I personally got into running by watching flow track videos when I was 18 years old. I used to watch these workout videos from colleges in the US, and I was so persuaded I actually went to a college in the US a year and a half later. And thank you so much for doing all this. And I guess my question is, if you could go back to 2016, 2017, would you have done anything differently? Would you have and what would you recommend to athletes these days that are coming up through the ranks? Like, would you suggest that they do a podcast themselves and video? I'm not exactly clear on a specific question for you, but I'd love to talk more about this space, because I really respect any athlete that's putting themselves out there and making content, because I just think it's really important to see the bigger picture of growing the sport and make it bigger than just about yourself.
I mean, basically with the possibilities we have today, everyone is able to put some kind of content about his running journey out. I mean, social media channels, you have podcasts, you have YouTube. There are very little barriers to actually get started. And I think, especially the fans, they don't expect like high quality content. I mean, you guys at Sweatelite, you are doing high quality content, but typically they are very happy about behind the scenes inside looks from pro athletes or athletes who train like in like magic places like Kenya, because it's not, for them it's not so accessible typically, because they're not traveling there. So they like to see how it is for us, to what is our like day-to-day training. For us it's very normal, but I learned for the fans it's very interesting and motivating and inspiring to see how we are training. And when I started, I had a little bit of different motivation, I would say, because in the beginning I don't have the feedback from the fans that they that they're happy to have someone to put it out. For me in the beginning it was some kind, actually also an idea to finance myself, because I was not willing to be part of the professional sports system in Germany, which typically contends that you are part of the army or the police for different reasons. I was not so happy with my federation at points, so I didn't want to depend on them basically. So it's also to grow some audience, to share some insights, but also it's interesting for brands to work with you, because I mean you are very well connected to the communities. But then I mean, especially on road running and with the expos, and to meet everyone before the race at the warm up, Tiergarten, you see a lot of runners, and they are very happy to get those inside looks, and they tell you that they love it. So that's also motivating to try about new ideas, to have a weekly podcast, to show how it is to train in Kenya, to show how it is to train at Renato Canova special block, which is like so that was at, I would say, the later stage of my career, maybe 3 to 4 years ago, a big motivation for myself to have those last few years, you never know, 3 or 4 years of your career, to share as much of that journey as possible.
I kept hassling you to do it in English for a while there.
Yeah. But it was also appreciated in the German community. I did some of the bits in Kenya when we were there together.
Yeah.
So I switched back to German. But yeah, anyways, I mean, for English content, I mean, Sweatelite is top notch already. So I try to stay in the German bubble, but especially the feedback the last few days when I announced that I will retire. Most of the messages I was able to read until now, still a lot not read yet, but there were very positive messages and thankful for sharing the journey and not letting out the bad phase of the career, because sometimes there's also the feeling that we are so talented and everything comes easy to us, but that's not true. I mean, you know it already as well. If you have 4 bad races and then 1 great race probably, and you have to eat a lot of dirt for the 1 great race.
Yeah, exactly. So, biggest lessons you've learned as a pro. So you shared a little bit about the marathon and how you learned how to fuel. You shared with me personally some of your biggest lessons. Let's just say I asked you the question of go back to 2015 and you could talk to yourself as a 2015 athlete in that point of time, and you could give yourself advice. What are a couple of things you'd tell yourself?
I think the first, and for me also most important lesson, was to not overdo it just because you have time or more time to train. So when I quit college in 2012 and started to be like a pro runner, you have like 24 hours every day, you try to maximize on training, you try to maximize on everything, but it's very easy to lose balance because you're so focused on training. So every session, even if it's an easy run, you overthink everything. And I had the feeling, okay, now I'm a professional runner, I have to like really put all my energy into the running thing, and you get really like stressed actually, and you're very keen to overtrain, in my opinion, at least for me. So sometimes to not do a session if you're not feeling well is easy. It's mentally tough, but it should be easy because it helps actually to recover. And the second lesson is is similar. Also especially in hard workouts and intervals or whatever, long runs. In the beginning of my career, I was really trying to maximize on every session, to like really go all in. And in hindsight, I would say save the 100% for races. I mean, if you have the feeling you can go harder, but you're already like at 97% of whatever is possible, stay with the 97% for your sessions and go all in on race day, because if you get too greedy in training, injuries will occur. I mean, if you go all in every session or every bigger workout, it's very likely that at some point something gets hurt. And I mean, third lesson, sometimes it's very basic and similar, but sometimes you forget, if you're like really focused and in the zone, to actually enjoy what you're doing, because it's a big blessing to be able for some part of your life to call running your job. I mean, it's to see beautiful places. I mean, St. Moritz, Sestria in the Italian mountains, Kenya, South Africa, also Montegordo, I mean, you know as well. It's so beautiful where running brings you actually, and also the people you met along the way. And I mean, times are important, but also to enjoy actually the ride.
We can get very fixed on the times and forget about the places we're taking, for sure. So what's next for you? I was actually thinking, I was talking to Reem before about how you decided to stop racing, at least at the highest level. And you went to your sponsors and said some of your contracts went for a couple more years, and they all sort of said, we're willing to support you in whatever you do in the next couple of years, which is probably, speaks to the content that you've been making and how powerful it's been in the German running scene. But for those that are not familiar, you can talk about your recent addition to the family and then also what you plan on doing moving forward. If you'll continue, you'll be a runner for the rest of your life, of course, but if you'll decide to do any trail races or anything like that's in mind for now.
I mean, read the post, they know that with the birth of my daughter, I realized that is very difficult. I mean, I want to have time for my family for sure, and to train as a professional runner with my decent talent. I'm already like probably at 98% of what I'm capable to do. So if you want to progress, you probably should be even more focused, more at high altitude, maybe run a little bit more if it's possible. And I realized that for me it's not possible to put in more effort into running without losing like time for family. So that's what when I decided to step back from professional sports. I'm still very sure that I will be a runner probably as long as I can, but not 200k a week anymore. I still want to experience running on a different level. I love to experience trail running because it's so different to what I did before, like track and road running, but like just for fun. And depends on like future projects. We have a lot, but there's still a lot to be discussed the next few weeks. I'm a very honest person, so the decision I made was probably 3 weeks ago, and like 5 days later I was meeting my Adidas guys in Herzog and calling the others, like to tell them personally that I'm not able to maintain the lifestyle of a professional runner. And so far no one said we don't want to work with you anymore for the future. I mean, especially with Adidas, there are a lot of, for me, very exciting opportunities. I mean, some of the awesome guys who developed those awesome shoes are here actually in the room.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
What, you wanna wave?
That's awesome.
Yeah,
thanks for coming.
Yeah. They are like really, they're really great. So I've always been a running shoe nerd since I was a kid. I'm very much into detail. I love to test them. I love to wear and tear them. So that's one stuff. I always love to motivate and inspire the next generations of runners, no matter if they're like on an amateur level or potentially like going all in. And we are still in talks what kind of role I will have with the different partners I have in the future. Also, I started a company with my friend Felix. You met him in Kenya as well. We will start to actually import premium Kenyan coffee in the next couple of months from the Nandi Hills region.
You told me about this about 6 months ago. No, more actually, I think.
Yeah,
so
it was going a long way actually.
That's awesome, yeah.
Way more work than I expected. But okay, now we have the company. Now we have we know the farmers. We visited them in February. It's close to Eldoret, the region. Also, I mean, a lot of famous runners come from the Nandi Hills region. It's not just about the coffee itself, but also part of the profits we make will go to Tirup's Angels. For those who don't know Tirup's Angels, it's a NGO founded by local Kenyan female athletes actually from Iten, like Chon Chelimo, Mary Ketani and some others. And it's an NGO fighting gender-based violence, doing a lot of education stuff around there. Because their friend Agnes Tirup, world record holder for the 10K, got murdered I think 2 years ago by her partner back then. And I know them for quite a while. We heard about the idea and the project last February when I was there for training camp, I mean in 2022. So we had a lot of talk with them already. We went to their first like public event at the Eldoret Cross Country, and that was the point when I had some, I thought, okay, we have to do something, I mean, to support it, and yeah, so we came up with the coffee thing. I'm a heavy coffee drinker. Kenyan coffee is not so popular yet in Europe, not like Ethiopian or like Brazilian coffee, but we tried to make a small impact, and hopefully, I mean, I told them we cannot promise anything, but depends on how successful we will be. We try to support you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, so much insights into your career. Does anyone have any questions for Philipp on the podcast?
Don't be shy.
I've got one more for you. So if anyone else has any more, you can think about it for a moment. This is a question I ask actually almost all podcast guests on the Sweatelite podcast. If you were put in charge of the sport of world athletics, would you change anything? Or would you create any sort of new event that you've ever thought about would be interesting? So, for example, I love the idea of the Ekiden in Japan.
Oh yeah.
And that's a local thing to Japan.
Yeah,
it's a road relay. It's really popular. It's actually what the whole sport there is revolved around. But the US and Europe have never really incorporated a big event like that. There's small events that happen around that are really sort of social in a way. But if you were put in charge and Sebco said, Philip, you're in charge now, I can't do this anymore. What would you do? What's one of the first decisions that you would make, if any?
I mean, there are probably two parts I would put some focus on. One is like more a negative thing, sticking with our sport for long. I mean, still anti-doping has to get better. They made some big improvements, especially in the last 2 years, in my opinion, with the athletics integrity unit. But I mean, I'm too long in the sport to know that there are so many loopholes for people who want to cheat, and that's really frustrating for the honest ones. So this has to be intensified. I mean, sometimes it's bad PR for the sport, but in the long run it makes it more credible, in my opinion, also for young talents coming into the sport. That's probably part one. The other one, I really like your idea. I was fortunate enough to be actually part of an Ekiden relay once, the Chiba Ekiden.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's not happening anymore. But back then, it was some kind of international invitation race, actually. So there was a team from New Zealand, there was a team from I think also Australia, Kenya, Ethiopia, also Germany, US. And for those who don't know Ekiden relays, I'm not sure if it's always structured like this, but for us the race in Chiba was like, it's a marathon, and it was between 5K and 10K stretches. So they put the race into six parts. It was a mixed event. I also like that idea, actually, and it's very competitive. I would love to have some kind of team event also for, let's say, road running. So the Ekiden would be actually a really fun event also for Europe. I think would be really exciting also to be televised. I mean, in Japan it's live TV coverage. So they closed the whole city with 1 million people just to have 15 teams run a marathon. That was really crazy. Yeah, I mean, and funding for athletes. Okay, it's also another topic, but a big one. So to try to give back a little bit more, but you can also put it with the IOC. I mean, they make a lot of money, and there should be a little bit more prize money for athletes who don't have contracts, because a lot of them are like just coming or getting by like on a low level.
Yeah.
But I know it's difficult.
Yeah, for sure. All right. To finish off, any questions? No, I think we've gone through them all. Cool. Thanks so much, Philip. Really appreciate it. All the best in the future for you.
Thanks, Matt.